Knock, knock. It's our
Eddie
Venom
Brock?
spoiler review. No, it's not Eddie Brock. It kind of is Eddie Brock.
A little bit. It's half of Eddie Brock and
It's
half of Venom.
And half of Venom. Roth, I've been so excited to do this because, number one, there are so many things about Venom that I wanted to talk about in our regular review that I couldn't because it was a spoiler-free review. Number two, because, I did it with Danielle. Danielle and I had a great talk about this, but I know that you have different thoughts on some things than I do, so it'll be fun to break that down in a spoiler way. Venom. What a weird movie, huh?
What a bonkers banana pants movies. I think that maybe I didn't watch your review yet because I wanted to be fresh.
Fair enough.
Not come in ready to debate, but ready to just discuss this movie,
Yes.
which is hopefully what we're all doing here. We're going to hit some of the sort of comic book references that were in there, but largely we're just going to talk about the film as a whole and how it's structured.
Yeah.
Here's what I think. I think there's a kernel in this film of one of the most innovative, interesting, refreshing, funny, surprising, and unique comic book movies that we've seen in years. Unfortunately, that kernel is surrounded by a massive, weighty, I guess like pile of dirt that obfuscates the gems. I mean, the gems are there. I think that what works about this movie, that was a metaphor that didn't work at all, and it's not unlike Venom. Here's the thing, is that it is a movie that, interestingly enough, I think is in an identity crisis. It is very fractured in terms of what it's trying to accomplish, which in a way is ironic or coincidental or sort of like perfect because it's Venom. It's Venom and Eddie Brock, and he's got this parasite that's taking over his system, and they are in a relationship. And the relationship is the best part of the movie. Tom v. Tom, Eddie v. Venom, and then eventually it becomes the story of a boy and a symbiote, and he's sort of like his best friend. You know how you have that best friend that's an a-hole, but he's your a-hole?
Yes.
That's sort of what Venom becomes to Eddie. He's like very sassy, and they have a really odd and funny relationship. He's half his pet and half his buddy that he has to drag home drunk from the bar before he bites a head off. And so I feel like it's such a weird take, and it really is funny in moments, that I'm sad that it took 50 minutes to get to Venom, and those 50 minutes, in my opinion, absolutely do not work. They are self-serious, they're weighted down, they are a completely different tone, they are completely unself-aware. I feel like Michelle Williams' wig represents a lot about what doesn't work about this movie.
Okay.
Like the details are not paid attention to, the commitment is not there, and sort of like good enough is let go.
For me,
okay, that was a lot, so I apologize.
To continue the metaphor, the kernel for me in this movie was was Tom Hardy as Eddie Brock in Venom. That was the kernel. But for me, that kernel was a huge, big, fully popped piece of salty, buttery, delicious popcorn, and it was in the popcorn box with a bunch of those unpopped ones that you throw away in the garbage when you walk out of the theater because they're not fully formed. So the question is, was the popcorn that you ate worth all the little kernels in the bottom of the bag? And I understand why, for a lot of people, that was not the case. For me, the linchpin of this movie was so strong. I loved that performance so much. And I felt like the movie smartly put so much of it into that performance. I thought it relied so much on that Eddie Venom relationship and that performance. That was enough for me to come out of it saying, like, it's not a perfect movie. My God, is it not a perfect movie? And there are some things that do not work at all. But it had enough for me to walk out of it saying that it was worth my time and worth going to see, because it reminded me, and I know this is going to sound weird when I'm discussing this about a movie that I liked, it reminded me of the 2015 Fantastic Four in this way. I felt
me
like
too.
I but in a different way than a lot of other people. In this way, I came out of the Fantastic Four, the 2015 Fantastic Four, saying, "Man, were they trying to do something different with this movie?"
Yeah.
And they lost their nerve. And I don't know if the full version of that movie would have been good.
It would have been
but
interesting.
It sure would have been interesting.
Yeah.
And I feel like this movie is what
Same
that
story.
movie could have been. I feel like the difference being they did fully commit.
No, they didn't.
I think they did.
I really don't think they did.
With Tom Hardy and that performance, that was the weird part of that movie, and they handed the movie over to that, and I think that for me was the saving grace, is that they didn't water that down.
But they didn't hand the whole movie over. That's where. See, I agree. I'm gonna take my shit. This is what Venom's making me hot. And not in the way that you would think. I think what's maddening to me about this movie is that those moments I actually really love them. Like I truly do, because it's so weird, and it's so ballsy, and what Tom Hardy is doing is so committed. He's so totally committed to it. That said, Ruben Fleischer, I feel like, wasn't given free rein to make that the entire movie, because none of the other pieces of the film, or else it sort of got away from him, which happens, because you can see where in Michelle Williams' performance, she's doing something, right, with that character.
Sure.
But what she's doing isn't quite matching what Tom Hardy is doing. And then there are moments, and Riz Ahmed is playing this sort of Elon Musk character, and I feel like in order for it all to have worked, everyone needed to be on the same page about what they were doing, and I don't think everyone was. It feels very fractured to me, and like he could have gone so broad in this. I agree. He should have just gone all the way there with the whole movie, because I don't know, and this is what I mean about the wig, I don't know if that's a joke or not. And that's my problem.
Well, that's kind of one of the things.
I don't know.
That's kind of one of the things I liked about it, because you're right. There were some things in this movie that I didn't know if the movie was in on it, or if they weren't in on it.
There's so many things I think they're not in on.
I kind of like that. I'm not really sure whether they know that this is ridiculous and crazy, or they don't know. There's some things they didn't know. I agree. Riz Ahmed was not on the right frequency for this movie, and I don't think that's on him. I think that's on the direction.
On Ruben Fleischer.
He was not modulated to the correct frequency.
And
I don't
was
think that
Michelle
is good.
Williams.
And Michelle Williams, her character was left over from whatever draft of the script they wrote 8 years ago. Before, because I agree. I'm not saying that everything in this movie worked. There were a lot of things in this movie didn't work, but enough in this movie worked for me. Enough of it worked that I came out of it saying, I was beyond Tom Hardy, because I've had some people saying, like, well, you're just saying you like Tom Hardy and that's why you like the movie. That's not the only reason I liked it. I liked the characterization of Venom in this film, and I think this was going to throw a lot of comic book characters, but I like this idea that it's not just Eddie Brock's the guy who's angry and this alien gets on him and now he's a big vengeful bully. Like, Eddie Brock is a guy who has had a downfall of his own creation due to his own inability to do things properly. He's a loser. I like that they made Venom that. I like that they made Venom a loser. I like that he is...
I think he was joking when he said he was a loser.
I don't think so.
When he said he was a loser on his own planet, I think he was cute. Because then they try to have it both ways. This is a movie where then 2 minutes later, Venom's like, you made me change my mind. It's like this weird, like, romantic moment between Tom and Tom. It's a movie where Michelle Williams has to say the line, hey, I'm sorry about Venom.
That was one of those moments that I'm not sure if the movie was
I don't think they were.
But I had a different take on the Venom thing than you, though, because the way that I saw it was he said, hey, I'm a loser, Eddie, and you're a loser. And we need each other because we're both losers. And together, neither one of us is a loser. And I liked that the whole end of the thing, it wasn't necessarily a big skybeam ending. That whole ending, I think, was Venom saying, I'm a loser on my home planet. I don't want them coming here because then I'm a loser again. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to stop this from happening because I'm the king of the hill here. And if these other guys come back, then I'm just another symbiote, however I'd say it both ways. That's what I liked about the movie. So I liked how they characterized it.
But the problem is the first slog of 50 minutes, which are not they are not fun. The tone is, so we talked about this a little bit earlier today on SJU. The trailer sold this very dark, gritty version of Venom, right?
That was, which did a bad disservice to the movie.
Which they totally did a disservice to the movie because that's not what the movie is at all. I can see where comic book fans would like this interpretation. I could see where they would hate it.
Yeah, I agree.
And say that it's a bastardization of what Venom is. That all aside, it did a disservice to the movie, but but it actually was accurately selling what the first 50 minutes try to do tonally. You set Eddie Brock, here's the thing, you set him up as being the quote ace, the best investigative journalist in the world, and he could not be worse at his job, demonstrably bad at his job. He went in and sort of with very little research tried to take down this Elon Musk-like character, knowing if he's the best at what he does, he should know that that's not how that's done. You know, he should know that he waits until he has evidence and then he makes a report. Like, nothing that he's so dumb that really what the movie should have done is set up Eddie Brock. He goes into this super secret laboratory. First of all, Jenny Slate's wasted in this movie, but that moment is particularly egregious when she's like, hang on, just go into the really crazy, dangerous lab by yourself, wild card. Then he goes in there knowing how dangerous it is and that people are dying, breaks window because there's only one homeless person in all of San Francisco, and it happens to be the one that he's friends with, right? That's there, coincidentally and very perfectly. Breaks the window, thinking not at all. So if you're just going to have him do all this dumb shit, make Eddie the dumbest guy in the world who happens to be a genetic match for Venom. And then the movie's like perfect.
See,
like, just stop telling me he's good at his job. He's demonstrably terrible at his job.
But that's the thing. Like, that's how I looked at it completely the opposite way. Was he's a talented guy who's a victim to his own impulses. He has no impulse control. When he sees something, you're right. He goes after that thing. After this Elon Musk character.
And no one would call him the best investigative journalist in the world. No one would call him that. They'd call him another thing, an internet star.
But I think he's a talented guy who can't get out of his own way. They mentioned in the movie, like, you don't want to get fired again. You got run out of New York for the same thing. I think that's what sets him up to being open to this whole team up with Venom. Is he's a guy who has talent and has skill, but can't get out of his own way. He's the instrument of his own destruction. That's how he finds himself at the bottom, at the lowest low, following up this random lead that this lady in the store gives him because he's got nothing. He is. I liked how they portrayed him.
I really didn't, and I thought they were trying to sort of have their cake and eat it too in a number of ways. I really thought, largely for the most part, the performances were out of sync, which tells me Ruben Fleischer wasn't driving the boat, and he was either getting a lot of different notes or it was many different versions of a lot of different scripts, whatever it was. The performances were out of sync with each other. The only person that was the only three people that were on the same page were Ruben Fleischer, Tom, and Tom. That's it. Eddie Brock, Venom, and Ruben Fleischer knew what movie they wanted to make. And either Sony didn't have the balls to let them just go ahead and go apeshit and make that movie the whole way, meaning the rest of the script, the rest of the characters, the rest of the tone, bring Venom in sooner, much sooner. We have to wait so long for him. And those 50 minutes are not entertaining. They fall flat. They're uninspired. They feel like a movie from the bad era of comic book movies.
Was it 15 minutes?
Yeah, I felt like it. I really think it was.
I didn't go through that. I didn't go.
One of my friends clocked it. It was like a solid like
until the whole Venom shows up.
Until he says food, and which is the first magical moment where you're like, what the shit? What is like? He starts yelling at Eddie. It takes so long to get there, and the time that it takes to get there is not entertaining.
I guess it didn't feel like that much of a slog for me. I think it's because you bought into the way, or I bought into the way that they portrayed Eddie Brock and you didn't, which I think is sort of, that's the difference between sitting there and saying like, I'm not buying this. And that's what I feel like is this whole movie is you're going to buy into it or you're not. And that's just a matter of taste.
I bought into his relationship with Venom. I bought into that small portion of the movie, but it wasn't enough. And the rest of the movie for me just didn't match what he was doing there, which is to say this because I know I'm being the not fun one and I'm going to get yelled at. I get it.
It's rough. Have you seen the reviews for this movie? It's fine.
But this is what I think. I think when people go see it, it's not unlike in some ways The Predator. We talked about this.
Right.
Where I can think that a movie is objectively poorly constructed, and meaning that I don't think it fulfilled its own goals in total. I think it fulfilled a portion of its own goals in total.
Yeah.
And still, it can be an enjoyable movie to watch, which means that for the second half of that movie, I was laughing hysterically.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed myself because I thought it was so insane. And there were moments I was going, what is happening on the screen right now? Which is far more refreshing than a sanitized, boring, over-noted, tightly controlled superhero movie that has nothing new to say or do. I would prefer The Swing. in the long run and the short run, I would prefer a swing than no swing at all.
See, I am on the complete other side of that, whereas I felt the Predator had no confidence in anything.
Oh,
that
the
it wanted to
Predator
be.
was. I'm not comparing the two. Like the Predator's completely insane.
Yeah.
And poorly constructed. But all I'm saying is that I can see people enjoying Venom. I could see people enjoying the Predator.
Sure.
And neither one, in my mind, is a film that reached its own potential. Ultimately, it has, maybe each has aspects that are entertaining.
Sure.
But it didn't reach its own potential fully.
Yeah, I guess the Predator didn't really feel like a swing to me so much as just a melange.
No,
of
I'm
completely
talking about
random
Venom
stuff.
when I say
Yeah.
the swing. Predator,
Venom,
I don't think
thought,
was a swing.
Yeah, the Predator, I agree with you there. Venom, and this is the fundamental difference. It's like, I agree, Venom is a huge swing. It's a big swing. For me, that swing connected. But I can see why it would not connect for everybody because, it is wrapped in so much of it was without Tom. If in this alternate world where it's not Tom Hardy and you just put whoever in this movie, it is that dated piece of just throwback 90s kind of, nonsense. But I think they accidentally or purposely put that strong central element into the film that worked so well for me that it's not to say that it's a perfect movie. It's not. It was better than the bad stuff for me. The bad stuff was there, and a lot of it was bad, but the good stuff connected to me so well that it overwhelmed it for me, and it was enough for me.
I think that it's a type of movie that a lot of people will enjoy and find to be like that guilty pleasure, so bad it's good kind of movie. And I have those as well. So I totally get it. There's movies that I love for that reason and I think are hilarious. But I think on a structural level, the dialogue is take out Venom and Eddie, which I do think works for me. But I can also see how that would not work for a lot of comic book fans.
Sure.
But take that out and it's flat dialogue, relationships that don't matter, a series of nonsensical decisions on everyone's part, but particularly on people that are supposed to be super geniuses or really excellent, the very best at what they do. They just make a series of rapidly declining, like stupid one after the other decisions that I don't buy. Strange costuming, frankly, like really weird. Just they're putting, and I think what they did with Michelle Williams in this movie, and I know it sounds like a strange thing to pick on, but it's the same thing as Fantastic Four, where that detail to me was emblematic of the movie. They had a wig on Sue Storm, and because they reshot so much, because they were basically trying to do two movies in once with Fantastic Four, and it was a mess. There were scenes within one scene where she would have on the ombre hair, her real hair, and then the blonde wig where she was supposed to look like the real Sue Storm. Now, it's not as bad with Michelle Williams in Venom, but it's so clearly a wig, and you have so much money that the fact that that detail just passes by and doesn't matter, I think is emblematic of the fact that so much about this movie just doesn't matter. They don't care. They're not paying attention. And it's sort of like a poor man's superhero movie at this point, but yet there's money behind it and huge names and big stars and one aspect that works. That said, I can see a ton of people loving this, enjoying it, saying you got to see it's so crazy, and it's so bad it's good. In the same way we have all of our guilty pleasure
I don't think
movies.
it's so bad it's good. I think it's good. I like it's not a so bad it's good thing for me. It was for Danielle. Danielle was on the so bad it's good train. I'm not on the so bad it's good train. I legitimately enjoyed it. I thought that what they did with the central relationship and that performance from Tom Hardy was one of, I can't think of a more unique element to a film in this genre than I've seen in a long time. As far as just something unexpected, crazy, different, a swing that worked, a risk that worked for me. That may be part of the reason why I valued it so highly too, was I went into this movie and was actually surprised. Which, to be honest, I was worried that I was not going to be. I was worried that I was going to see a very flat, generic superhero film, and that's not, or supervillain film, or whatever you want to call it, and that's not what this was.
They don't even know what they want him to be. That's also unclear.
Yeah, I mean,
they clearly don't want him to be fully a villain.
No, they don't, and that's why I think that you should not put Spider-Man in this movie, and they were smart not to. Is this is not a movie where this villain or character is predestined to fight Spider-Man.
No, he's not.
And I like that.
But I think that speaks to the tricky part about Venom and the way Sony has done Venom, period, and the way they try to crack it is that they are trying to expand the stories that they can tell, and you cannot just have a straight up killer as your main protagonist in a series of films, but you can have an anti-hero, and that's fine because it makes sense that makes sense for Venom, right? That's accurate. But at the end of the day, he does become his pet. It becomes a boy and a symbiote, whatever. Like a boy and Eddie and his little Venom. You know, it really, even the way Michelle Williams talks about him, it's that. And I'm glad you enjoyed it. I laughed at lots of it, and I can see where people will really love and enjoy it for what it is. But for me, it is objectively not well made. It is objectively not well made, and except for the one aspect of it that really does work. And let's just talk about some of the particulars, though. There were some sort of Easter eggs in here as well that people may have noticed. This isn't so much an Easter egg as a moment. The kiss. Yeah. The symbiote kiss.
One of the weirder moments of the movie.
Which, again, I don't mind weird. To agree with you 100%, at the end of the day, I would always rather see a big swing, even for me, if it's a miss, than no swing at all.
Right.
So I commend Venom for taking a swing and for it connecting in this one key area, which is Venom.
Right.
I commend the movie for that 100%. So we did see a tease of She Venom. It's a little unclear to me if that means that she's coming back or if that was sort of a momentary transition. But this brings me up to one of my logical questions about the movie, which is I get that Eddie responds better to Venom and to the symbiote than others do.
Yes.
But every other person dropped straight dead. His heart was dying. And yet once it left him, he was pretty much fine to run around until they reconnected. So that's a question. And then she also seemed fine.
Well, I think it was all about, as they established, some people can keep it. There was the one person that had it for 3 days and then died. So I think that some people it kills instantly. It eats everybody from inside. Even when it left him, the doctor was just like, dude, you're dying. Like your heart is dying.
But he didn't act like he was dying, which was, again, for me, an issue.
I think if it had been out of him for longer, then he would not have been doing so well. It's this thing that it eats you alive from the inside. So I think for me, again, as a viewer, just sort of trying to puzzle it out, it was more of she had such a short-term exposure to it that it probably didn't do that much damage. And if it leaves Eddie, which I think is an interesting way to go in the sequel, is kind of an Iron Man thing with the heart thing, is like if Venom leaves Eddie for a prolonged amount of time, the ill effects that his body will have taken from having this thing inside of him for so long, they do, again, it's symbiotic. They need each other now, like physically they need each other. So that's another question that, maybe if I see this movie again, my explanation will be disproven. It's very possible, but that's how I read it watching the film.
So there was also a tease of him entering the Spider-Man universe. There was a mention of an astronaut named Jameson, who is John Jameson, the son of J. Jonah Jameson. So obviously they're at least, I don't know if that's just they're in the same world. You never know, kind of a moment. I don't see Sony combining Venom and Spider-Man anytime soon. I think, I think this movie is going to do very well this weekend. And I wouldn't be surprised if, I'm fascinated to see what the drop-off is, because I do think there's going to be a lot of people going like, you got to see it for yourself. You know what I mean?
I think it's going to be very hotly debated amongst the audience, as it is being among, well, not so much the critics. I think a lot of the critics, there's a merry band of us, I think, that are sort of like, this is not great, trust me, but there's some crazy stuff happening here. But there's a lot of back and forth, I think, that's been going on even in our offices. So I think that discussion's going to spill over. Will it generate enough for a sequel? That's a good question. Do
you think that it'll generate enough to give Venom more legs? That's where, because it could have if it was a terrible, like Fantastic Four, it's going to have a huge open. What do you think the drop is going to be?
It's a funny movie.
It's a funny movie, which is
it's
why
a funny movie, which I think is going to work. And it's not boring. It's funny. I think even if you hated it, it's still audacious enough that you're just like, oh my God. Like, I
know I'm going to tell people to see it because you have to see it yourself.
Yeah, it's unique and different. So I think that hold pretty well.
Yeah.
I'm very. It did well in previews the Thursday night that it opened. This will be going up Saturday, so the Friday numbers will be out. But it's looking like it's going to hit projections. Who knows though? Word of mouth is so nebulous, and I could see the word of mouth on this thing being atrocious.
Yeah.
And I could see the word of mouth being this thing being like. I don't get why the reviews have been so bad. I loved it. I don't know which way it's going to go.
I think a lot of audiences are going to love it. I think they're going to think it's really funny and fun. And it is audacious, which is refreshing, because that's what I was going to say is like any day I would rather watch this weird, crazy movie.
Yeah.
I've said this before and I stick with it than something that has been so watered down by the studio that it's not even a movie anymore.
Yeah.
You know, it's a note. The movie.
Note the movie.
Note the movie.
I will say one thing that I got to take Sony to task for is that bodega scene, the turd in the wind scene.
Oh God.
Which
The
that turd in the wind line, out of context with the rest of the movie. Like when we saw that at Comic-Con, I was like,
crazy.
What is this? What?
Yeah.
I think that line made way more sense in the context of A, the rest of the movie, and B, the fact that it's the last scene of the movie.
Yeah.
Which why do studios do that?
I don't know.
Why do they put the last scene of the movie in the trailers? First of all, that we are Venom, that's the punchline of the movie.
Yeah.
That's the tag of the movie. And to give that away in the trailers is so stupid to me. I guess you just didn't have enough good Venom dialogue scenes to put in there that didn't give away big plot points, but I hate that they did that.
I think setting up the relationship between Eddie and Venom, like,
But they pitched that as the
tough
setup.
in a trailer, right?
Like they pitched that as the setup, and that's the punchline to the
Yeah.
joke. And so I don't like that Sony did that,
Yeah.
because I think it's put people off on the wrong foot from this movie from the beginning.
Yeah.
So I do have to take them to task for that.
Okay.
I hope if this does do a sequel that they market it to what it is and not what they think people want it to be. I don't know. The whole marketing for this movie has been super weird. I don't get it.
Yeah, I think the marketing really hurt the movie. Well, I don't think it'll hurt it financially because I think it's going to do well, but
Right.
I think it misrepresented the movie.
It did, yeah.
And I think it's interesting because there's it's making me think of like the different ways movies get made. And there's Notes the movie, which is what I think The Predator is, where I truly believe Shane Black got angry and took every note anyone had ever given him in his life and put it in a movie. And then there's Note the movie, where it's like so boring by the time you get to it, because they're afraid to try anything with these characters.
The last half of Fantastic Four, the remake for me was
so
It was
boring.
one huge studio
Yeah.
note of everything we've seen before.
Yeah, and it's just like they're just afraid to try anything.
Yeah.
And then with Deadpool, with Logan, they're taking some risks and they're really letting the creators go for it.
Yeah.
I think they were taking some risks with Venom. They were
agree.
taking some pretty big risks
Yeah.
with Venom. I just don't know. I really don't know if like Ruben Fleischer. I really feel like half of that movie just got away from it, and he focused on the half that he got totally. And I wish in the first 5 minutes of the movie, like we'd set up that Eddie was a loser, but truly, like that, because at first he's pretty successful, that he was like truly a pathetic loser, and then he gets Venom, and that's the whole movie is like them learning to love each other, because that would have been much more fun for me to watch. Okay, can we talk about Carnage?
Yes, let's.
I mean, like, and this represents so much about like the tone of Venom too, because it's so cheesy and it's such a throwback. But is it on purpose or is it on theirs? There will, or is it not? Are they in on this?
I think
there
they
will
are.
be
Carnage. I
Were
feel
they
like
in on
I
that?
feel like they were in
You
on
feel like
it.
they were?
I feel like they were,
I mean,
because
with his
it's
wig, maybe.
it's so over the top that I can't imagine that they weren't.
Right?
It's how I landed on that. First of all, I think Woody Harrelson is great. I don't know what the consensus is going to be. I think Woody Harrelson's great casting for that character. I am excited about a Woody Harrelson Carnage because Woody Harrelson is one of those actors, like, he is capable of doing, like, have you seen 2012?
Of course.
Woody
Stop
Harrelson in
it,
that
of course.
movie is bug nuts crazy, and he doesn't get to do that as much as I'd like to see him.
I would like more of that from him too. You've seen Natural Born Killers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
he's got that
He's
in
bananas.
him. He's
Yeah.
bananas, and you don't get to see bananas. Like, that was kind of one of my disappointments with Solo a little bit,
Yeah.
was like, he's playing this kind of space outlaw, but he was very kind of subdued, and it's like, he's got those shades inside of him. So I like that choice, and that Carnage moment. I don't know. I just have to assume that they were in on it because that's, again, it's such a weird choice.
It's so insane. And so his terrible wig makes me wonder if her terrible wig was an on-purpose joke. I'm very confused. If you guys have an opinion, let me know. But I will. Here's a movie that I would watch.
Yes.
I would watch Tom Hardy doing his thing as Eddie in Venom, and Woody Harrelson doing his thing with Carnage, and them just bitching at each other. You know, I will. One sequence that I actually liked a lot was when he was fighting Riot, and they kind of like kept falling out of each other.
Yeah, they were like swapping and
switching. I thought that was sort of fun. There's the seed for a completely psychotic movie, and what was
and
presented
I so
to
hope
us
they make it
at the end. So do I, and that's the thing is like I always want to see that train wreck happen because either it's going to be glorious or it's going to be a glorious disaster.
Yes,
and at least it'll be interesting to watch.
Yes,
right?
I agree.
And I can't say that all the time, which I do, and then not hold true with what we got with Venom. I would rather see that than something boring any day. But do you think it's weird to reveal Woody Harrelson as Carnage before we even actually know what Venom's going to do ultimately?
That's a good question. I mean, I think they can maybe buy themselves one movie without going full Carnage.
Yeah.
Maybe. If this succeeds, I think they were, again, there are compromises made in this movie, and I felt like including that at the end of this movie was one of them, in the sense that like they wanted to make sure, in case people were iffy on a sequel, like, oh, I don't know if I want to see another one. They're like, oh, but this one's going to have Carnage in it, so that the fans might be like, oh yeah, then I definitely want to see it. There's 4 million wrong ways to do that, and there's a couple of right ones, like Doctor Strange and Infinity War. So I like the casting. I like that choice. But, you know, this movie, it was so sort of two different things that, you know, I could see the next one being brilliant. Yeah. And I could see the next one being a complete and utter train wreck.
Well, I could see it being both at once. So my hope that what they take away from this is that this is it. The parts that played it safe even a little. This is what I just figured out right now, Dan.
Okay.
The parts that played it safe in this movie even a little bit, which I really feel like the first parts were asking me to take it seriously, which it was impossible to do because he's so dumb. Like everything. And Jenny Slate is totally wasted in this movie. You had an opportunity to transform Jenny Slate into a crazy symbiote and you didn't do it. You just killed her. Come on. Like she should be She-Venom or something. Anyway, the parts that were asking me that didn't, that tried to play it safe totally fell flat. Totally, which tried to be sincere or like with that terrible dialogue or create these like relationship dynamic. All of that didn't work. So don't do that going forward. Yeah. Only be insane and fully commit to it 100%. And then I think we have an interesting movie. In whatever Venom 2, should we get a Venom 2?
Should we get a Venom 2?
I have no idea if they just then entirely back off and go in a different direction.
I hope they don't. I hope they embrace what works.
Yeah.
And the only thing that worked 100%. There's a few things that work a little bit, and there's one thing that works really great, and there's a lot of things that don't work at all. So
I think Riz Ahmed is one of our best actors, and I don't think he worked here.
No.
I think Michelle Williams is by far one of our. She was one of our best actresses. She gave a great comedic performance in I Feel Pretty.
Yeah, she did. She was really good in that.
And I think she was trying to do something similar here, but
it just wasn't on the page.
It wasn't on the same page.
No, I mean it wasn't like physically on her pages.
Yeah.
There was nothing for her to work with, really. It was like nothing. You could have written her out of that movie with basically no consequence.
Wouldn't have mattered at all.
Yeah.
Not good.
Not good. You know, I get you need a name, but that's one of the compromises that I think did not work. Was he's got to have a love interest. He really didn't.
No, he really
didn't have to. And I love Michelle Williams, and I love her work and everything, but
I think you could have cut. This would have been a such better movie. You could have cut that entire relationship out. The doctor could have just been a buddy of his, you know. Yeah. And you could have gotten to Venom a lot faster, and then you could have had Jenny Slate, that doctor, that scientist, become She-Venom in those moments.
Maybe, yeah.
You're right. We just cut her out, and it didn't matter. It actually made the movie better. Yeah. What do you think about the cameo?
Stan Lee.
Yeah.
It is what it is. It pulls you out. It's one of the few. I'm trying to think if he's done that extensive a cameo for a non-MCU movie. That's his most extensive non-MCU cameo that I can think of for quite a while. Because a lot of times it's a picture or he'll be an extra on a bus or something.
Yeah.
It's fine. It's like, hey, I feel like they're just getting all they can out of Stan Lee right now because they know that Venom 4 might not have Stan Lee available for them. So I thought it was cute. It still takes me out of a movie every time he pops in. It's like, oh, I'm watching a Marvel movie.
Yeah.
But whatever.
I think everybody's like, oh, Venom is in the MCU, and I don't think we're seeing Venom and Iron Man.
It sent a bit of a mixed message. Like when I saw the fact that he had that much of a presence, 30 seconds, but still, that sent a message to me like, oh, they really are folding him into the MCU because they really put a full-blown Stan Lee cameo into this. But again, I cannot say this enough. The worst thing that could happen right now to this franchise is to bring Spider-Man into it.
Yeah.
Don't do that. I hope they don't do that. I hope they don't look for the easy cash in on the second one and they make a really interesting movie without Spider-Man, because this is not the Venom right now that is ready to go toe-to-toe with Spider-Man. This is a new Venom. Like, we end this movie, it's kind of like how I like some superhero movies to end. We end this movie with the origin story out of the way and the relationships established so that you can go into the second movie full bore. The last thing you need right now is to throw Spider-Man in the mix, because that derails everything they've just done.
When we meet them again, they're the odd couple. And it's a whole Dexter situation where I guess, Eddie's finding these bad people in the world via his work in order for Venom to eat their pancreas.
Yeah, and sometimes he goes too far Venom, and sometimes Eddie has to pull Venom too far to the Eddie side. That's what I like, and that's what I want to see more of.
We had I think, a biological discussion about how this actually works in terms of when Venom bites off a head, is Eddie digesting it? It's very unclear to me.
My theory is that he instantly metabolizes.
Yes.
But who knows?
At the end of the day, for me, this is a movie that had one element that was unique and interesting and fun and funny enough that I was impressed with the swing, but it had many, many others that I felt where it got away from Ruben Fleischer, or he was given so many notes that he only got one precious zone that he could own, and it was probably because Tom Hardy wanted to do it that way, and Tom Hardy has a lot of power. So at the end of the day, the movie is not just two, but several different movies in one that don't all. There's whatever Riz Ahmed's in, there's whatever Michelle Williams in, and then there's the one that Tom Hardy and Ruben Fleischer are in together. That's the only movie I like that's in these 2 hours.
Yeah.
And it's probably only 30 minutes of screen time.
I feel like if more of the movie had been given over to Riz Ahmed and Michelle Williams and those side plots, then I would be more in line with you. But I think enough of the movie was centered on the central relationship between Tom Hardy and Venom, and it worked so well for me that it was enough to overcome the parts that didn't work, which are the same parts that didn't work for you largely. So that's why I'm on the other side of the coin on this one.
All right, so I think it's probably going to be so bad it's good for some people. You think it's going to be so good it's good for some people.
Yeah.
And maybe for others it's just straight up no thanks. But it'll be a highly contested movie. Everybody is welcome to, and we enjoy different opinions about this. I've already heard a ton. Although everyone's agreeing about what works and what doesn't. We just don't agree with how
Everyone
we feel
agrees
about
on this
it.
movie except for whether or not they liked it.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
And I liked what I liked, and I really hated what I didn't like. That's sort of how I felt about it at the end of the day. But it's still more interesting to watch than 10 boring movies that I could probably list, but I won't be that mean to them. Lots out in the theaters, though, this weekend. There's The Hate U Give. There's A Star Is Born. There's a lot of movies to watch. You guys are probably going to go watch and enjoy Venom, and we can't wait to hear what you think about it. What things did you notice that made sense to you or didn't? What did you love? What did you hate?
Yep.
Are you Venom?
Are we Venom?
Venom?
Thanks for watching.